Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Takeovers for Racial and Social Justice. Today's topic is Hispanic Heritage Month, the theme being Unidos, and inclusive. It has to do with inclusivity, being inclusive in the Latinx community. Just to let you know that the session is being recorded, and we'll go ahead and get started with introductions. So why don't we go ahead and start with you, Gretel? Maybe you can tell us your name, your pronouns, where you're from, what you do in public education, and maybe some of your CTA involvement.
My name is Grado Rodriguez. Born in El Paso, Texas, grew up in Los Angeles, taught for about currently living in San Diego for 20 years, in the South Bay kind of area. Specialized with ELD. I went into the profession specifically to teach ELD students simply because of my own experience losing my language. I wanted to make sure other students valued and kept their culture and language along with learning English. Also work with ethnic studies. I was the director of a Chicano youth camp in San Diego for 3 years, but involved with them for 13 years. So ethnic studies is a full circle for me. So I'm very much a proponent of ethnic studies. And as far as CTA, I've served in a lot of different levels, but I think the ones I'm most proud of is I'm currently back to being a site rep. Rank and file, that's fire right there. And I love being a site rep. There's just a lot of work in meeting people and talking to teachers. There's no better. I know that sounds wrong, but I honor all our people that work in higher levels, but rank and file, that's our fire in our union.
That's it. Who'd like to introduce themselves next? Why don't we go on to Veronica?
Hello, I'm Veronica Dominguez, or you can call me Veronica Dominguez también. I rep both those names because I am a third generation Mexican-American, American-Mexican, Chicana. You know, there's a lot of different things one can call me. There's only one in particular that I kind of don't really care for too much, but I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. I work for San Diego Unified as a speech and language pathologist. I am from Oakland, California. Woohoo! So I do rep the Bay Area, and I rep it for a variety of reasons. I much like Greta said, you know, the rank and file, that backbone of civic involvement, that backbone of resistance culture that allows us to be involved in our communities, to represent who we are, to retain our languages, to encourage our languages, to continue to always learn our languages. I read somewhere that in order to speak a language, or the ability to be able to speak a language, is either a problem, a right, or a resource. And I found that so profound because that is also intersected with race and class and gender in many different areas. So within my work as a speech and language pathologist, I get to work at a dual language school in San Diego, where the majority of the teachers are teachers of color. And for me, being a woman of color and not growing up seeing a lot of teachers of color, it has been one of the most empowering and healing experiences ever. And so that's what I do. And I went to schools in the Bay Area, Cal State East Bay. My original degree is in criminology because I thought I wanted to be a investigator, but I am a researcher at heart, I would say. So with all that being said, it is my honor to be here in this group. I recently am a CTA cadre trainer, so I look to everybody here as my mentors. I come find you, even if you can't, even if you turn your ringer off, I'll come find you. And so those that are laughing know this is true. So anyways, that's me, and it's my honor to learn from all of you.
Great. Thank you so much, Veronica. How about Andrea?
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Reina. My pronouns are she and they. I originally come from Orange County, in Southern California, from Anaheim, and I teach in East Palo Alto. I've been living up in the Bay Area for, over like 10 years now. So I'm proud to represent both Southern California and the Bay Area as well. I am an ELD teacher. That's also how I became an educator. I fell in love with education, teaching abroad, and I came back to the United States and got my master's degree and my credential, and I've been in education ever since. I'm back to teaching 8th grade, and I'm back to teaching ELD. I teach 8th grade history, 8th grade English, and ELD. I teach all kinds of different things here in East Palo Alto. I serve my local as bargaining chair, and I serve CTA in a variety of different ways, including serving as one of the ABC at-larges. Sorry, I'm in my classroom and now I gotta like turn the lights back on.
Oh,
And ABC, for those of you who don't know, yeah, he's waving my hands and getting the lights back on in here. That helps support our locals in political involvement.
thank you. And then we have one more panelist, Armando. Armando, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello. So my name is Armando Cervantes. I go by any pronouns except for it. I identify as Chicanx. I more closely align myself to being Mexican American, as well as, you know, my ancestors who are part of the Mexica tribe. So I am an aspiring educator. I'm currently in college studying to become a bilingual elementary school teacher. Just hoping, thank you. Just hoping so I can catch students who are at a very young age, who are in the developmental stage, and trying to sort of introduce LGBT and show them that it's a very much a normal thing and it's nothing to be ashamed of, and that they have a place here in our world. I am a student CTA member and also chair of a caucus called Raíces that my mother's a founder of. I think that's pretty much it. I am a tiny bit nervous, but I am very excited to hear other voices in my community and very excited to share my perspective. So hopefully that I can improve inclusivity in our community.
Thank you, Armando. That was the hard part. The rest is going to be easy. So we have a small group, so it's going to be a nice intimate conversation. But I was wondering if our participants, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Is it just me?
We have someone, Myra.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I'll go. My name's Christina Cook. I go by she, her for my pronouns. I'm first grade teacher in Folsom, Cordova, which is up near Sacramento. I serve my local as the CTA, what would I call it? The state council delegate. And then I am also our human rights and equity rep for Folsom, Cordova. I'm additionally an equity leader for my school district, and I do trainings for teachers regarding issues that come up, and I'm an advocate for all teachers with that role as well. I went to college at Chico State, and I was a Spanish and Latin American studies major, and my first job teaching was in Costa Rica.
Nice. Thank you, Christina. Welcome. And Myra, are you able to unmute and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I am almost home, so I will have my camera on shortly. Mayra Alvarado, pronoun she, her, hers. I am a fifth grade Spanish teacher in Oakland Unified. I am an executive board member of my association, Oakland Education Association, CTA, ABC committee member, along with Andrea, fabulous Andrea. I also know some other folks in this call, so it's nice to see familiar faces. Yeah, and I'm just here to learn, hear and learn from y'all.
Okay, thank you, Myra. Be careful driving. Oh,
For sure, will do.
okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. Like I said, this is a dialogue and conversational style. And we're just hoping to learn from each other's experience. So all of you, please speak from your own experience. Again, I want to repeat that the theme of this year's Hispanic Heritage Month, because I flubbed it earlier. So the theme is Unidos, Inclusivity for a Stronger Nation. So my question to the panelists is, and I'll also type it in the chat as well. What does inclusivity in the Latinx community look like to you? And what do you think needs to be done to get there? So who'd like to go first? And I'm going to type that in the chat. Andrea.
Well, for me, a big part of being inclusive would be moving away from the term Hispanic. Because for me, the term Hispanic, and I have to like pause myself from cringing because I know there are folks who do embrace the term Hispanic. The term Hispanic is inherently exclusive because Hispanic refers to people who come with Spanish heritage or who speak the Spanish language. And first of all, not everyone has Spanish heritage or speaks the Spanish language. There are many people who speak indigenous languages who are indigenous or who speak other languages, maybe not Spanish, perhaps they are monolingual in an indigenous language, monolingual in English because that's just the language that they grew up with, or they speak Portuguese because they're from Brazil or from another language, that's a different country that speaks a different language. So there's so many other different aspects. And if we're talking about Latinx folks, we're so much more than just one term. And I think we need to be intersectional as well. And we need to embrace that our indigenous roots for one, and our indigenous roots were so much more inclusive of everyone. And when I'm talking about everyone, I'm talking especially about our LGBTQ plus community, our LGBTQ plus folks, our gender expansive folks. And when we're talking about colonization really stymied our gender expressivity and our sexual inclusivity. So when we're talking about inclusion, we need to make sure that we're including folks of myriad different languages, myriad different ethnicities, and myriad different gender expressions and sexual preferences as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Would someone like to respond to the question? What does inclusivity in the Latinx community look like to you? And what do you think needs to be done to get there?
I'll go. I'm grateful that one, we had the Chicano movement, right? And that we had solidarity between the Brown Panthers and the Black Panthers, that we had high school students back then that gathered and pretty much fought for liberation in the sense of we want to determine how we identify ourselves. And that's where the Chicano term came, the liberation of I'm going to self-identify versus a government practicing erasure and colonization. So I want to thank that movement that included the Black community. Now, fast forward, we have the Black Lives Matter movement that has pushed us to the point of us, again, talking about how we identify, right? And even in the Chicano movement, which is not even within my own Chicano community, who's homophobic and practices machismo, has not done a good enough job, including the Chel, Mayan, Indigenous, LGBT that was a part of that movement. They were out there with us and they created their own movement because within the LGBT community, they were not accepted as brown LGBT. They did not have places of power in there, including the Black community. So they formed their own organization and liberation through the Chicano community and Black Panther movement. So the fact that we're here now is the fact that we failed at continuing that identity and supporting it. And that's why we have ethnic studies, so that we could talk about that history and we can nurture it so that no one forgets that. I don't mind if you say Hispanic. If that's how you identify and you're proud of that, I want you to use that if that's what you're comfortable with. My issue is when I'm in a room and you refuse to use mine. You refuse to, even CTA does not have it, right? NEA has been advanced enough to move it. And I bet you it wasn't because they just decided. There was probably a group of people that said, hey, you need to change it. And so in the discussions of starting within the union, I remember asking politely, nicely, hey, what do you think about this? And I was told there's people in political power, influential power, that are going to fight you if you bring this up. Don't bring it up. Don't try to change it. Don't argue it. If you want to move up, you better not fight this. So to hear people now embrace it and talk about it is beautiful, right? We need to take a step further by organizing an NBI to change it so it's more inclusive when we see that. Because the fact is, Hispanic erases a lot of identities, especially the indigenous one. Also, the Black community within our own culture needs to be included in those identities. So we have biracial people that are Black and Chicano, or Koreans that were born and raised in Mexico, Chinese, because of the railroad. So we need to expand. We need to be inclusive. And I have my own child, which, by the way, I need to check my straight privilege because I didn't say my pronouns, which I prefer ella, her, she. That's a privilege that I constantly have to check as a straight woman, that my child is also teaching me about that. So when my child entered the union, they didn't find themselves. They didn't see anything or hear anything that included them. So for me, it's a constant making sure I pave the wave and I help as a co-conspirator, because I also have to check my privilege as a straight person. I have to listen to the LGBT community, but I got to be honest. I'm going to listen to the brown Black community first when it comes to that, especially because of the colonization that was caused for us to erase the people that we accepted. We accepted trans and LGBT. It was through colonization that forced us to not accept it. So, and I identify as Chicana, but when I talk about the community, I say Chicanx.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Armando, I'd like to hear from you. What does inclusivity in the Latinx community, and I'm just use the term Latinx because I didn't want to use Hispanic. I thought Latinx was a little bit more inclusive, but I understand that that's not how everyone identifies. So let me go back to the question. What does inclusivity in the Latinx community look like to you? And what do you think needs to be done to get there?
Well, I think we have to fix issues of intersectionality. I joined the union so I can find other people like me, just like my mother said. I wanted to find a group where I felt like I would belong to, but I didn't really find that too much. There's not really too much representation or enough representation, whether it's in media, whether it's in our education system, or whether it's in the union of BIPOC LGBT. It was either an LGBT group that I got sent to, which didn't have a lot of BIPOC representation. It was very, how should I say this? I guess American or Caucasian. It was very much that. I never saw any people from the Latinx community. I barely saw anyone who was African American. Like, I didn't see anyone that was more like me. And then I would go to the ethnic caucuses, and they were trying to push out LGBT issues because now LGBT is being associated with more of those who are Caucasian. And they're starting to push that out because they feel like it's more their issue instead of our issue. So that's why our Caucus Raíces was created, so that we have merged those two communities together. I feel like there does need to be a lot more, just a lot more where it connects the two together, where it's not inherently like associated with a certain race, where it's not like a Caucasian thing, or oh, that's just like an American thing, or oh, that's this thing, because it is a part of my culture, a part of certain like Native American tribes. Like I identify as a two-spirit. We believe that two spirits, people can be born with both the spirit that's more masculine and both the feminine spirit. So it's still very much part of our culture. We've always had this. It's more so the settlers that then came over that brought on, we should be ashamed of it or we're going to hell for it. So now to see it turn around and see it more, to be more dangerous in BIPOC communities when you're LGBT, I feel like I'm going on a rant. But yeah.
So embrace the intersectionality between gender and ethnic or racial identity. I think that's what I hear you saying, Armando. Does that kind of capture it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thank you. Veronica, would you like to respond to the question, what does inclusivity in the Latinx community look like to you, and what do you think needs to be done to get there?
First of all, I want to say this room is fire. Like hearing everything in this room and presented in such eloquence. I don't generally use that word just because it's not that I don't like that word. I feel that sometimes we worry so much about how we express ourselves if we're not eloquent. That is again a measure of that colonization, right? That takeover of your spirit that expresses your feelings, and then you go home and you're like, oh my God, I just sounded. Really, it comes down to I sounded so uneducated. I sounded so inferior, and so for that reason, I appreciate going last with a room full of so many wonderful people that have all of this great experience. It is complicated. Let's just put it out there. It's complicated being mixed people. We generally don't refer to Latinos or I'm going to use Latinx, Latinos. I don't like the word Hispanic also, but that is part of that complication, right? Because if you go to Spain and ask a Spaniard who is what is Hispanic, they will say them, and we are Latinos, because the tier again is Hispanic is more of a whiter European blood, where Latinos are the rest of the conquered people. And so within our own culture, as it has already been said, and this is where we share a lot of commonalities with other colors, other races, right? These boxes that they place us in, is we'd have this colorism component. And so the lighter and whiter and the of different colors your eyes are, the higher you are seen on the class and caste system within being Latino. So, in that bag of beans, there's always that one black bean. And I always say that that's me, right? Because within Latino culture, there's this variance of colors. And when you're the darkest person in your family, which is me, and your brothers and sisters have whiter skin or eyes of different colors, you grow up interpreting the world like you could easily interpret the world as there's something wrong with me because I'm dark. But for me, growing up in Oakland, that has that strong anti-Jim Crow background, and it has that strong gold rush background. I grew up with neighborhoods that were integrated. So we had the language of the street, we have the language of the home, and then we had the language of each other's houses, that when we went there and we ate each other's food and we spoke to each other's parents, it was some sort of mixed type of vernacular. So so for that reason, I say it's complicated, but it's also joy, and it's also fun, and it's easy for me to say Mexican American culture is the best, right? But but we're all the best. I look at my Black friends, my Chinese friends, my Asian friends, and I rep Chinese in a particular different way, and Japanese, Chinese from the Bay Area for very historic reasons, for the same reason that I would rep Black culture, within and intermixed within what is it look like to be inclusive. We've got to take on the Catholic Church, don't we? So when you look at religion and how the hold that religion has on Latino people, because of be free, gender-wise, sexually wise, and I don't mean free like free. I mean like really imbued in who you are as a natural person, embracing of our sexuality, that is halted and curtailed and demonized within the Catholic religion. And I'm not talking about Jesus, so don't put me on blast saying Veronica don't like Jesus, because I did not say that. I'm talking about religion as a system, race as a system, Hispanic as a system, and Hispanic as a census system. When you go back to our parents, I'm third generation here, so that's a very different, it's an interesting experience when a lot of my friends may be first generation or second generation. The further you get from the border and from your family being from otros lugares, the further you get from really being an activist sometimes, because that push to assimilate, that push to be politicized, that push to be fooled, let's say, by certain political agendas that say if you vote as a party that is associated with a white dominant party, let's say, like the Republicans, this is what your taxes are going to look like. Make no mistake, the Democrats get involved and they retool language also, but use it in a very different way than what you would see with the Republicans. So for me, who I am is a mixture of the joy. It's a mixture of the food, the language, the music, my grandparents. Ooh, I want to start crying when I say it this way, right? But but it is also the political environment. It is also the disallowing of people, of Mexican people, Mexican American people, particularly in California. And then it's Mexican people, Mexican American people, Chicano people that have paved the way for every other Latino person to come to this country. And it's very interesting, as Gretel said, even within our own cultures, we within our own Latino-ness, if you mistakenly call another Latino a Mexican, ooh, watch out. They'll be like, I'm not a Mexican, I'm a Cuban. You know, you call a Cuban a Puerto Rican, I'm not a Puerto Rican, I'm a this. So it becomes very, very complicated. But I think that we can become a lot more inclusive, looking at our history, looking at how being white has allowed you to have land, to have economics, to have advancement, to speak English. What has that meant for you and our families? To look at the role of the Catholic Church. And then on top of that, we are the only darker mixed race that has been designated white by law. Okay, so again, when you look at what that does to us as Latino people, there is an element of that within our culture to be of a higher class, a higher status. So all that being said, I will tell you, if you got it, when push comes to shove, though, I do see our communities being willing to back each other up. But when it's push comes to shove, it's got to be, because prior to that, I think people can get into a lot of, we're segregated as Latinos. And so, you know, if I talk to my friends that were born in Tijuana, they have a different understanding and pride in being Mexicanos, right? And then the generational differences. So I think it's complicated. and yet underneath it all, remembering the joy and that common struggle that we have. And that struggle is for equity, for advancement, for power, to be seen as multifaceted people versus only one type of usually criminalized version of ourselves.
Thank you so much. There's a lot to unpack there. Thank you. And I think we understand that you weren't talking about anyone's faith necessarily, but actually the history of colonization, which was, the Catholic Church historically was played a huge role in that. So thank you for clarifying that, Veronica. So we have Grado has shared a video, a quick 5-minute video. Do you think it would be a good time to show that now, Grado? To kind of, it touches on some of the comments that our panelists made about how folks identify themselves racially or ethnically, or even it also addresses the intersectionality of gender and sexuality as well in that identity. So fingers crossed, hopefully everything works and we can show the video. You guys let me know if you can't hear it.
Is changing, especially when it comes to defining Latinidad or anyone of Latin people choose to identify, is always changing, especially when it comes to defining Latinidad or anyone of Latin American descent here in the United States.
And identifies Chicano.
I identify as a queer migrant Chicanx.
And I identify as an non-binary queer Latinx person.
I identify as Mexican American or as Hispanic.
At KPBS, we're now using the term Latinx, which is a non-binary way of saying Latino or Latina, in an effort to be as inclusive as possible. But we know it's not definitive and has proved controversial, because how we identify and are identified by others can get, well, personal. That's something UC San Diego professor Ariana Ruiz, who teaches about Latinidad, knows all too well.
It's the politics of labeling, and with that politics, of course, our conversations around race, sexuality, gender, all of those components come into play. So that is something that, again, it's so personal that it is one that is emotive. It's one that people have strong feelings about and will lead to very lively conversations and debate.
Which is why we asked you, our audience, to share how you identify and your thoughts on the X in Latinx. We got almost 200 responses, and they showed how deeply many of you are thinking about this many-layered issue. Some, like Priscilla Vidal, who identifies as non-binary, embraced the Latinx term years ago.
When I first started identifying as non-binary, folks is like, no, it's either male or female, and for me, I just don't identify as male or female. I feel like very gender neutral, and so the whole term Latinx kind of feels like that, but it also feels like it's its own movement and its own community.
Others, like Rodrigo Tapia of Chula Vista, prefer terms like Hispanic or Latino because they connect him with his roots as a Spanish speaker. He understands the need to be inclusive, but thinks Latinx erases his connection with Spanish, which he grew up speaking.
It lists a little bit of whitewashing insofar as the language is concerned. Because again, to me, Latino or Latina or even Latinx means that you're identifying with a culture that holds Spanish, in a special place within our community.
Another Chula Vistan, Michael Nzunza, also doesn't use the X. He prefers the term Chicano, a political identity label often associated with Mexican Americans that emerged in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. Like Tapia, he thinks Latinx is a term imposed by white people.
I've never heard anyone use it. I've never heard anyone identify with it. And it's just a term, I don't know if it's gonna stick or not, but it's not from us. Just like anything else, it's not from our community.
And that's a big tension point. Where did Latinx even come from? Professor Ruiz says that's a difficult question.
So there is no one origin story. When we're thinking about the use of the X within Latinx or the move from Latino, Latina to Latinx, the X is one that is discussed as coming out of indigenous communities throughout Latin America, It's one that we've seen used within Latin American feminist circles as well. When we're talking about Latinx within the US, as it's tied especially to the LGBTQ community.
Because of the lack of clarity about why people started using Latinx, people have their own interpretations and understandings about it. Alejandra Lucero Canan identifies as queer, Latinx, and Chicanx. And unlike Nzunza and Tapia, doesn't see Latinx as a colonized label coming from outside the community. She likes using the X because it makes people stop and think about who's being left out.
The X makes me think of the people that are not often included in these conversations, non-binary people, Afro-Latinos or Afro-Chicanos, and people with disabilities.
In the end, there's no single definition or understanding of any of these identity labels. But Ruiz says that's a good thing.
We want to think about it as embracing the tension, really leaning into the messiness that is a term like Latinx, like Latino, this question of Latinidad. It's not one singular thing, but one that is much more multifaceted and has lots of different histories and experiences tied to it.
Christina Kim, KPBS News.
Okay. Any thoughts or responses to what was shared on the video?
I think it really goes to show how personal identity is and how complicated identity can be within the whole Latinx community. Like for me, how I identify sometimes depends on who I'm with and just, you know, how much I wish to disclose and perhaps I wish to educate those that I'm with. So like I prefer Chicana and Chicanx. It depends, like, you know, maybe I might just say Latino or Latinx, depending on the group that I'm with, because, you know what, sometimes I just really don't feel like educating a whole big group of people. And so oftentimes with people of color, with LGBTQ plus people, the burden does fall upon us to educate folks. And, you know, sometimes we just don't have the capacity within us to do that. So sometimes I do kind of go with an easier way out. And, you know, it is sometimes easier to say, you know what, Chicana, Chicanx is a political identity for people who are Mexican American. It isn't, well, sometimes it is easy to say that, but sometimes, you know, I just can't. Right. I just don't have the ability to educate every single person. So I do sometimes go with a more bigger, broader, inclusive way, or identify Chicana, Chicanx, Latina, Latinx, and I'm also queer folks, and I'm very proud to say that as well. But we do should, as always, leave it to folks and respect how they choose to identify. And that's how it is.
I think that's the main point, right? I think that maybe that's the main point, like find out how people choose to identify and respect that. I think
and don't make assumptions.
Right.
We all know that what that's saying.
Anyone else like to expand upon a point? I got tongue tied.
let me try this. I want to add, I think that video was awesome. Gretel, thank you so much. It pulled a lot of what we're saying together. I think some of the fear behind some of these newer terms, right? There's fear behind it because we don't know if this is racism being retooled, reconfigured into something. And we're going to be, in our attempt to be inclusive and say, okay, we unwittingly are accepting a term that ends up working against us. And so that's part of, I think, some of the difficulty with the newer vocabulary, and that it does mean different things to different people. Through being inclusive, somehow we're going to exclude others in a particular way. And then having the discussion. We don't really know amongst ourselves, it's this difficult. So then in mixed company, and then talking with white people, Anglo people, people who do come from European backgrounds. Lately, I've been saying, I'm going to use my white privilege and talk about how I feel about, you know, the white part or the European part in me to discuss some of these things. But I wonder, for the dominant culture, and when I say dominant, I mean the culture that has the power and the influence. I wonder what are their thoughts when they hear people of color having difficulty with accepting some of these words. I mean, because we struggle even saying, let's say, white people, Caucasian people, Anglo, white people. It's like you said the most worst word to a white person when you even name white people. So here we are discussing Latinx, Hispanic, Chicano, with kind of more great freedom or utter abandon, let's say, versus the multiple ways we talk about whiteness. We can't even say white. So I think it's very interesting which one of the cultures becomes the one people invent words for.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about.
That's it.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to respond to the video?
Yeah. What I appreciate is that they were mentioning the intersectionalities of these identities, right? And I think for the most part, all of us here that I've known will respect the way someone identifies. I think the disrespect comes when an organization or a group says, hey, you're all gonna be under this identity. That's disrespectful, because even though you know there's others and you're not gonna add them because you think it's easier just to put everybody under this label, that's disrespectful. So I think we're looking towards institutions, not necessarily individuals, institutions that will acknowledge us and acknowledge that we're not gonna be under white supremacist structures that erase us. And the more that I look at whether it's Latinx, Hispanic, Latino, Mexican, whatever it is, I notice there's just a sense of erasure when it comes to our identity, especially in Indigenous background, right? They really want to steer away from that. And so there was doctrines in Mexico, white supremacist doctrines, that by bloodline, they would try to prove how white you were. Because I am European, I'll never be able to claim it, right? I can't walk into a room and be respected and have the privilege of a white passing Latina. I am lighter skin, right? But I have Indigenous features. And so when I look at my darker skin Indigenous sister in Mexico, obviously I have more privileges than she does, and I have to recognize that. But I've just realized how anti-Black and anti-Indigenous a lot of our identities come from. Chicano, like I sat across public officials, because I don't want to say their person's name, but they went to San Diego State with us, and we had a reunion. Mechistas had a reunion, and we all sat, and we were like, have you noticed, like you go to other cities and people think Mexican American is Chicano. And I'm like, where did they get that? Because we went to San Diego State. We were taught it's a self-identifying identity, meaning you don't have to be Mexican American to claim it. Oh, you're going to see my dog back there. So I met, again, in my high school where I was teaching at, we had 2 Korean Mecha chairs who grew up in Mexico and identified as Chicano, and they're Korean, and they spoke Spanish and Korean and English. They were trilingual. So try to tell them they're not Chicano, they would tell you, no, I'm Chicano, even as Korean Mexican. So again, it's a self-identifying. I want to make sure that people understand that it doesn't mean you have to be Mexican American. It's self-identifying. So I want to share that, but we have to, again, look at structures that include more than one identity. And right now, when we see Hispanic everywhere, the fact that this month is called Hispanic, and let's not even go into just this month, we're going to be celebrated when, again, it should be year-long, hopefully pushing out thick studies. We're going to see that more often, but I want our students to learn that they don't have to like I was taught not to marry a Black man, not to marry someone that looked more indigenous than I did, to white, kind of erase those features from my family line, become more white passing. And that's very real in Mexico. My son and I just went to a wedding where someone yelled to the whole crowd, hey, as long as we don't look Indian, right? And I was like mortified. But that's a reality within our culture. And so expanding, I don't want to say moving away or erasing. I don't want to erase somebody that says Hispanic. I don't want to erase whatever you have is what you have. But I need you to be open to expanding. And I need you to support when we're changing those structures or asking to change those, that you support it. Because when you stop it, when you gatekeep that label, you're practicing an old tradition of white supremacy.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the conversation, the insight, and for some of the audiences, some of these concepts are new. So I appreciate you all breaking it down and really really explaining it to folks. So we have two more questions, and we're kind of at the end of our time, but we have a few minutes left, so it should be enough. So the two questions, I'm going to combine them, is basically, how do you plan to observe Latinx Heritage Month, either personally or at your school site, in your classroom? And if you have any recommended resources, books, website, blog, or anything like that that you'd like to share. So who would like to respond to that first? How do you plan on observing this Heritage Month?
I do it every day.
I heard you say that, like it's not just 1 month for you, so it's like all year. Okay.
Yeah, it's every day, and we just did Grito at Chicana Park. That's an annual Unión de Barrio and Área Associated Raza educators. They've been doing it for the last 20 years. I was finally honored to be an MC there and to do it, and it's a beautiful thing. The whole community shows up and you honor the Mexican independence, the flag and everything. And some people might think, well, what's up with that? Aren't you American? And nobody questions when it's Irish Day, right? Everyone chose green, and no one questions that. They're like, hey, yeah, you're celebrating both. So you
don't
have to
even question the Confederate flag. So you go ahead and wave your Mexican flag if you want to.
So it's a beautiful thing, but I think consciously we should always be doing it every day. And the fact that I wear traditional clothing, I don't wear it every day. I don't have it on right now, but sometimes I do. And that day I happen to wear it, and someone goes, oh, I forgot my shirt today. And I'm like, no, that's not, we shouldn't be wearing shirts. Like that's a very, American kind of practice, get your margaritas and hats. And so please try not to do that. It should be worn every day. It should be a part of who we are. And if it's not yet, grab your shirt and start doing it. And if anyone tries to say you're being fake, you can say, no. I do what I want and I identify how I want. So, and also for me, it's so important because I went through such a deep depression during the pandemic. I realized I'm just not going to be apologetic. I'm not going to have to explain myself. I'm not going to tell you anything. If I say something, you don't get it, go figure it out. And if I have the energy, I will tell you. If not, I'm going to say, Chicana, if you haven't figured that out, if you don't know what it's about, if you assume, go do what you got to do. But I'm going to say what I need to say. So that's it.
Thank you. Real quick, Gretel, any a favorite website, blog, or podcast that you recommend for folks to learn more or to share with their students or anything like that?
Liberated Ethnic Studies is a great resource right now for teachers. We're putting a lot of lesson plans to incorporate and to include in your classes all year long. So you're not thinking just 1 month. So Liberated Ethnic Studies is a great resource.
Liberate Ethnic Studies, is that a website?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So it's just all one word, www.liberateethnicstudies.com. Okay, Thank you. Armando, how about you? How do you plan to observe Latinx Heritage Month? And any recommendations for resources or follow-up material to this conversation?
Well, I'm kind of like my mother. It's kind of something that we kind of do all the time when it comes to union stuff or any activism events. But since I'm in, sorry, I'm zoned out a little bit there. I guess the way to personalize it, sorry, I'm trying to figure out.
Do you want us to come back to you?
No, that's all right. So probably what I would want to do is in English class, I am a part of it like a shell group that which focuses the English class on texts that have happened with people who are LGBT and BIPOC. Like the Stonewall riots actually being led by a Mexican woman and then an African American woman. So I don't know what's the word right now. I think what I mostly have is what I plan to do in the future with when I become a teacher with my classroom. I do want it to sort of incorporate certain hidden figures in our history and sort of teach that to students year round. Just like my mother said, I do have some resources, and I have a couple books. Unprotected by Billy Porter. He is an African-American gay man, and he sort of shares his experiences going on with the world and also his diagnosis with AIDS. And I also have Juliet Takes a Breath. I'll put it down in chat.
Okay.
It basically tells a fiction story that's largely based off of the author's experience of a Puerto Rican woman who is LGBT, tries to help a Caucasian writer write about certain feminism, more like LGBT feminism. And it sort of goes with her experiences on issues that I've had, like with intersectionality, with people that try to pull like reverse racism, that tactic, or from people from her community that try to outcast her because she's LGBT.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those. If you could put those in the chat, that'd be great. Andrea, how about you? How do you plan to observe Latinx Heritage Month? And do you have any resources that you'd like to share?
I'm making a smiley face because I think that this sort of thing is something that we need to be doing every single day, and not just like with Black History Month or any other month. It should never just be limited to a month, that we need to be celebrating and honoring and educating our students every single day. And I do that by making sure that my classes are inclusive of everybody every single day. And for example, in history class, we make sure that we teach a fully inclusive history class. And we frequently tell, at least in the 8th grade history department, we tell our kids that unfortunately, a lot of what we teach is banned in nearly half this country. And we do have discussions about, why potentially it's banned. Why is it banned to talk about settler colonialism? Why is it banned to talk about genocide? Why is potentially a lot of these things, banned in a lot of the states? And I think it's important that all of our students are empowered to know about themselves. whether or not that we have ethnic studies at our school. So that's how I choose to honor Latinx History Month. And for example, I'm simply wearing this shirt today to honor what happened. A third major earthquake happened in Michoacan, Mexico yesterday, and a lot of the community in East Palo Alto has immigrated from Michoacan. A lot of my students have their grandparents are in Michoacan, so I wanted to make sure that I'm honoring my roots, and that I'm also in a way honoring, letting my kids know that I'm thinking of them and their families as well. And in terms of books, a great book that I read this summer is called Cemetery Boys. It's by an author from the Bay Area. They're non-binary, named Aidan Thomas, and it's a really, really great book that really, and first of all, when it comes to queer literature, so often there's just so many stories that are just sad, just straight up sad, with so little positivity in them. And especially when we're talking about queerness in communities of color. And this book does have goodness and happiness in it. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful story. So I definitely highly recommend it.
Thank
so it's
you.
more like, I would say in terms of reading level, 8th grade to high school.
Yes.
So
Like
some things
YA
that I do
fiction.
is make sure an inclusive library, and I'm an advisor. I'm the advisor of my first ever LGBTQ club in my school, and just making sure that we have the intersectionality of our representation.
Thank you, Andrea. Veronica, how do you plan to observe Latinx Heritage Month, and is there a resource you'd like to share with us?
Joy and resistance. I would say resistance capital is what our cultures have had from the jump, whether you came by ship or you came by foot, whether you came willingly, unwillingly, we have found a way to bring our culture to the forefront through representing what is authentic for us and resisting being assimilated. And the problem with assimilation is it only works one way, right? It hasn't worked like in this wonderful way that we've always imagined it. So I think making our cultures, our colors, our words, our language, or our, I don't know, así habla el mexicano, our mexicanismos, making it real for our students, showing them that, the way you use your language is important, and it can be important, and it's a progression of being important, because we're just judged so harshly and by ourselves. So our kids, our students see this, and maybe they think, oh, I can't learn Spanish, or I'm not good at Spanish, or they hear their parents saying no habla, él no habla, and you hear that, right? So we want to celebrate the language we use and what it sounds like in all of its messiness and its awkwardness, because it is an expression of the heart. So I think making that real for the kids and moving that forward across the love you have in your heart, the politics, reading literature, documentaries like Gretel showed us. There's so many on Netflix and on Showtime, and I wish I would have brought my list because I'm having a break. My brain is seizing up. Massacre of the Dreamers by Ana Castillo. It's an amazing book, and it really, really, really speaks to all of the issues we're bringing it up. And this book is like 20 years old now. White by Law, Ian Haney Lopez. He has been an amazing support person. I swear you can call him up and leave an impassioned voice message, and he will likely call you back or email you back. And he is at UC Berkeley with Angela Davis. So it's like, I wonder if they know each other. They're so lucky. I just think we should all go in there and just knock on doors one day. But really researching the Treaty of Hidalgo and understanding the Mexican Independence War, and then the Mexican American War, and then all of the politics that went on from that point on, and then mapping that on really with a timeline of the 1865, if you start there, or 1770, in the 1700s, if you like, 1800s, and every 50 years thereafter, map on a president, and you will see how cultures and race become gutted and disproportionate to how we get to celebrate, how we get to recognize ourselves, and how it's disproportionate in that it becomes a dominant white culture supremacist society. And that is who we are. And that will go back many, many, many centuries. So again, it's through resistance culture that we can expand that and become who we envision ourselves to be. So that is an everyday thing. And with joy and love and unapologetic resistance, like it was already said, you know, and with your lipstick on, which I don't have on right now, but I'm looking at Gretel's and I'm like on point. So always find the beauty in what we do.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your time, for your passion, for breaking it down for us, and really sharing your thoughts, opinions, and perspectives is very important. So this concludes our Tuesday takeover for racial and social justice, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Bye.
Bye. How did it go? Did it?
I think it